Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. This is a show that breaks down everything Eagles related from the last 7 days and looks forward to the future as well. And this may be the most eventful podcast of the off-season so far, because not only did OTAs kick off this week, so it was Tuesday that Phase 3 began, but it only took about 6 hours for the Eagles to rise straight back to the top of the Game of Thrones rankings and everything to turn into complete chaos once again. So we'll be getting through all of that in just a little bit. There's a couple of things, however, we would like to talk about first. And one of them is just a big thank you for listening. The growth of this podcast this year has been brilliant so far. We really want to keep that going. Obviously, the more of a fan base we can get and a community we can build, the more opportunities that present themselves for you guys, the more we can get you some freebies, get some tickets, get some prizes to give away. So if you are a fan of this show and you want to see more of it, then please hit the subscribe button. If you're in YouTube, it'll be on there. It'll be in the description. If you're on iTunes, hit subscribe, rate 5 stars. Now, where you're listening to this on, there is a little button that takes you to the iTunes store. You can hit subscribe, and right from then on, you get the podcast delivered to your device every single week without having to lift a finger. So not only is it free and more convenient than having to wait for a link, but it also supports the show as well. So thank you for all of your support and kind words about this show so far. It's only going to get bigger and better, but we would love your help as well. So be sure to rate it 5 stars, or if you're not a big fan, rate it 4, because, you know, why not? But before we descend into the epitome of Eagles chaos, the Eagles weren't the only franchise to have their own little problem, let's say, at the start of OTAs, because the entire league does. And that's all 32 franchises. And, of course, if you hadn't guessed, what I'm referring to is the unfortunate National Anthem debacle, which has gone on and just completely lost its meaning since a couple of years ago when Colin Kaepernick first started. At the beginning of it, it was just sitting on the sidelines, and then it was taking a knee after a chat with a former Marine. Now, we look at the Anthem issue now, and we see it as a sign of disrespect, a sign of discontent with your nation, that you're protesting and it's violent and it's not right, and that players should just shut up and play football. And that is so far from what the original point was. Now, I have very rarely spoken on the entire National Anthem protest, and I mean, I'd like to think it's with good reason, because being 22 years old, middle class, white, in the United Kingdom, I've got a very different outlook on those social injustices because I haven't lived through them, and I don't feel it's my place to say whether someone can or can't express their viewpoints. What I can do, however, is objectively look at this and say it's not right. Imagine this for just a second, okay? You go into work, whether you own your own company or whether it's for someone else. It's your first day. You've just had your job interview. Everything's great. It's a really exciting career path for you. It's a brand new window of opportunity. Dream field. You're working your whole life to get into Barbara's IT consultants. And you get there. And on the first day, everyone stands up out of their chairs. You're a bit confused. And they start almost singing a poetic credo of what that company stands for and how amazing it is and the customer service they provide and how fortunate they all are to work for such a lovely company. But just a few hours ago, you'd read that your company still invests in sweatshops, that there is a wage gap between male employees and female employees, that there is sexism in that workplace, that there is racism in that workplace, and that your friend who's worked there for a few years has told the managers and nothing's really happened about it. Nothing's changed. Would you really want to stand and sing how amazing that company is? What if you're someone that goes into that workplace having been racially attacked, having endured those racial slurs or those sexist slurs? Would you want to stand and say how brilliant that company is? Because that's all this Anthem protest is. It's all it ever has been. The NFL exploits players so much, and no one seems to realise, because it's glossy and they're athletes and they're superstars and they get millions and millions and millions of dollars, they're not the most wealthy people in that industry. That's the owners. That's the people behind the scenes. Their bodies are being exploited, and if you look at fringe guys, you can let's take an undrafted free agent who earns $400,000, and they get maybe a quarter of that after taxes and a load of other sort of intricacies within that contract. And they're being forced to put their bodies through hell. Now, you can very easily say, you know what, don't do it. And you know what, if you don't enjoy the company you work for, leave. It's the same thing. But the point is, if you look at any other country in the world that's not on American territory, and what I mean by that is North America, South America, I'd be inclined to include Canada because of the sport of hockey incorporates, obviously, Canadian and American teams as well. Let's take Europe. Name me one time, if Manchester United play Arsenal, you do not hear a national anthem. Why? Because both teams are in the same country. It doesn't make sense. Why would you need to say how amazing this country is when you're both playing in it to begin with? If it's the World Cup and it's England versus Algeria, you want to be proud. You want to show everything your country's about and represent, and almost you intimidate the other team. You look at the New Zealand All Blacks in rugby with their haka dance. It's a pride thing. It's a tradition. What happens in America, especially with the NFL, is paid patriotism is a way to enhance a relationship with the armed forces, and you can look into this as much as you want. You can shoot down this opinion as much as you want. You take paid patriotism, you apply it to a vast demographic of what could be African Americans. You've got a whole different realm of people in there. Some are white from Texas, some are British, some are Australian, some are African, some are French. You've got Samoans, you've got Hawaiians, you've got a whole realm of different people. Why would they all want to stand for one national anthem that has so many injustices they don't agree with? It's a human right to not stand for that. Veterans do not go overseas to fight for your right to specifically stand for that national anthem. They fight for the freedom of speech, the freedom of that country, and what makes America so great. And that it is the land of the free. And if it's the land of the free, free being the imperative word, there should be by no means necessary a punishment for choosing to sit down for something you don't agree with. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter. This has been months of built-up frustration on my half. I feel that I'm not in a spot to talk about this fully because of my location. However, while I know it's a very divisive topic, it is a very important one. And I think that there should be an eye-opening here. No one was protesting the anthem because of the anthem and what it represents. They were saying, I don't agree with the morals. How can we say this land is so free and amazing when innocent black men are being gunned down by policemen for no reason? And that is why people were protesting to begin with. And now the government are using this as some paid promotion for whatever they deem it to be. And it's not right. And it's absolutely not right. And I would urge anybody, player, personnel, scout, whatever, writer, whoever you are, if you're inside the NFL, they're taking away the right to kneel. Does not mean they're taking away that right to protest. If you want to find another way, you want to get creative, you want to do something very subtle with the uniform or on a kickoff, do what you have to do to make your voices heard. It is 2018. I'm bringing you a podcast from England. Technology has changed that much that some little poor 23-year-old can have his voice heard. If I can, so can you. Make a difference in this world and make a positive change so people want to stand for that anthem once again. Oh, well, I'm glad I got that off my chest. I mean, hopefully you've not zoned out by now because that got a little bit emotional. But let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles because that is what we've all came to see. And there's 3 different topics I want to talk about today. The first one obviously being the linebacker limbo that the team now finds itself in. So in the space of 6 hours, a promising linebacker corps which had, it wasn't a sustainable amount of depth, but it was enough to get them through season 1. And now they just have very, very little. Again, within the space of just a few hours, it was deemed that Paul Warrilow, a veteran linebacker signed in the off-season to really bridge that depth gap, had torn his ACL in what was essentially a non-padded injury, but that was a collision with fellow linebacker Corey Nelson. The ACL was torn. Warrilow is out for a season. Well, just when things are going bad, you might as well cut Michael Kendricks, right? Now, I don't think the team looked at this and thought, you know what, let's cut Michael Kendricks anyway. By all accounts, from what I'm aware of, Michael Kendricks was not at the first day of OTAs. So that move was already pre-planned. He wasn't going to take part in workouts. The team had tried to trade him for what felt like forever. He may as well be an eBay listing at this point. He's gone. Alright, so that was it. And it's just an unfortunate stroke of luck. If this had happened without the Warrilow injury, I highly doubt we'd be making such a big deal out of it. But here we are. So now the Eagles are without their starting weak side linebacker. They're without a depth piece. But how important is this? If we look at Kendricks last year, of course he had a brilliant season. A lot of that was because of the injury sustained to Jordan Hicks, which kind of forced him back into the fray. Not so much as a middle linebacker, but you would have Joe Walker starting at MLB. It will be Kendricks on the outside to just give somewhat sustenance and keep, 5 DBs off the field. But Kendricks had a resurgent year, but it's not easy to forget that just 1 year prior to this, he was playing in preseason week 4 against the New York Jets. And then he was benched for most of the season. And then this year, he came back and he had a pick in 3 consecutive preseason games. And then he doesn't play in the 4th one. And he has a huge season where he's tackling everywhere and he's not a coverage liability. But the Eagles are set to pay him around $8 million. And if Jordan Hicks was healthy, that's $8 million for what? 30% of snaps? The plan all along was to trade him, but the thing is, put it this way, okay, if I walk into a restaurant, okay, and I buy a cheeseburger, and I drop that cheeseburger, and I go, well, I can't get a refund because I bought it, so I'm going to have to try and sell it to someone. If I'm outside, that burger's getting cold, it's already dropped and full of germs, and I'm going to people, hey, you want to buy this cheeseburger? 50% off, it's a bit dirty, it's not quite as good as it used to be, but hey, 50% off? No, 40? Take it, take the cheeseburger, alright? That is what happened with Kendricks. He was shopped for that long that there was no value left for this Philadelphia team. They had no choice but to go, you know what? We'll save that. I think it's around $4.4 million overall they save with the cap reductions, and they'll apply that somewhere else, or they'll try and extend Brandon Graham, or they'll do something similar. What should have been a bigger sign, yeah, and I'm going to shout out my friend Kyle Bennett from Underground Sports, and I can vouch for this because I've spoken to Corey myself. Corey Nelson, when signed, was told he would be seeing starting action. Now, given he plays the same position as Michael Kendricks, you can argue that would have just been a team's way of incentivizing him and getting him on the practice field and really kind of motivating him. Or you could look at it that was always the plan. That moving Kendricks on was a given, and it throughout the draft and the trading and the free agency process, there just wasn't a lot of optionality there. So now what do the Eagles have? Well, they signed Kyle Reynolds, a linebacker out of Arkansas State, and with a bit of luck, I don't want to spoil too much or ruin any plans, but it's all been set. We're going to have an interview with the Eagles' newest linebacker coming up a little bit later this week, I believe. So that's going to be fun. That's going to be a lot of fun. So he's come out of Arkansas State, undrafted free agent. Kyle Wilson, I beg your pardon, his name. So I'm getting too confused with Leroy Reynolds, who was signed a little bit earlier. That's what happens when there's this many linebackers. But Kyle Reynolds, that's going to be an interview we're doing a little bit later this week. Do they need to replace Kendricks? Or can they put faith in Corey Nelson? I mean, you look at Nelson, he, I think, benefited a lot in Denver. He struggled at times in coverage, but overall, you look at his progression through that Broncos defense, what he learnt, and going from a special teamer into actual on-the-field production, there's a lot to like. There is a significant amount to like, and he's built in that same kind of vein as Kendricks. And I think if you take a look at the way that this team is being constructed in that next man up sort of mentality, they just need a veteran outside linebacker would be the solution here, I think. Let Nelson develop just a little bit. Now, he's 25 years old, 7th round drafted, and I think it was 88 tackles off the top of my head with the Broncos during his stint there. But his niche kind of grew and grew and grew in that Broncos defense. And I think with Jim Schwartz being as fluctuant as he is and wanting to move guys around, we could see Nelson as that starter. But bringing in a veteran to just solidify a little bit, it's okay. I mean, worst case scenario, they don't replace Kendricks and Corey Nelson's a starter. Behind him, you've then got Nate Jerry, who I think would be a really exciting player to watch this offseason, who's bullied his way up through special teams, got some defensive reps, and now has a real shot to compete for a depth spot. Behind them, you've got Camu Grugier-Hill, who led the team in special teams tackles last year. Big season for him. He's now going to come in with the chance to again get some more snaps on defense. Joe Walker is an outside linebacker, but I think that, honestly, he could be a little bit out of this equation. If not, it's going to be a very fun 3-man battle to watch. Durability has not been on his side, however, since being in the NFL. My main concern isn't Kendricks. It's not the outside linebacker spot. I think you've got enough guys there to rotate around and make that work. Jerry, who is that hybrid safety and linebacker position type guy, can drop down one play and just completely disrupt the passer. One play later, you've got Corey Nelson, who has 6 pass breakups to his name, being a real force on the outside on screens and slants. My main concern is what happens over the middle. And it's not even so much this season. I mean, bear in mind, Jordan Hicks has only had one full 16-game season in his career. It's what happens after this, because now Warrellow's not there. Okay, Paul Warrellow is gone. So which means Jordan Hicks, if Hicks goes down, what happens now? Because Jordan Hicks is one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL when healthy. The problem is that he's very rarely healthy. He's struggled with durability throughout his career. And while they may be unrelated, all these injuries, it was what originally sent him to the 3rd round to begin with. So what happens now? If Hicks goes down again, as amazing as Nigel Bradham is, I don't think he could quite line up at 2 spots at the same time. Yeah, he'll try, don't get me wrong, but I don't really think it's feasible. Well, at the minute, you've got Leroy Reynolds, who, I mistakenly mentioned earlier on, or undrafted rookie Asante Brown out of Western Michigan. Now, Leroy Reynolds has been in the NFL for 6 years now. He's quite experienced. He's been around. He understands what it takes to play the position. He only got 5 tackles last year. I don't think that's who you want to hang your hat on if needs be. Let's be honest. They need a starting middle linebacker. The good news is there are some guys left available. The bad news is this is the worst spot to be in imaginable. Absolutely, you couldn't make it any worse. Because there is a significant need. You don't know what Jordan Hicks is going to be. So you think, alright, fine, you know what, that's brilliant. Not a problem at all. Let's get ourselves a new swanky middle linebacker. Perhaps a Navarro Bowman. Brilliant, okay, let's pay Navarro Bowman $10 million. Who starts? Are you just going to take the L on Jordan Hicks and let him ride out this final year of contract and let him go? Or are you going to overpay for Bowman as a depth and then his career goes downhill? That's a very difficult spot to be in. There are a few different ways the Eagles could look at this. I made an article recently taking a look at a few of the linebackers that could well be strong pieces. I think Brian Cushing is a brilliant option because, like Jordan Hicks, they're both injured all the time. Now, we're not taking shots here. I think Cushing has always carved out a starting role. Injured or not, he's always been productive when on the field, and he has got that ruthless mentality that will be adorned in Philadelphia. Because he has those durability concerns, I think he would genuinely be a great fit because he doesn't need to be a 3-down linebacker. You can sit him down for 2 plays, you can let him have a drive off, rotate him around with Jordan Hicks, get the most out of him, then give Hicks the extension and find another one. Or alternatively, you bring in someone such as Corey James, who is just 24 years old, formerly of the Raiders, had arthroscopic surgery on his knee before the start of his 2nd season, but before that had started 9 out of 10 games. And before that, had the 4th most sacks in Colorado State history. The problem with James is that he's just a bit fragile, he's a bit delicate, and again, I think with that much potential at such a young age, it would be wise to take a wild card on him. Let him develop, let him compete with someone like Leroy Reynolds, let him compete with an Asante Brown to stay behind Jordan Hicks, and let those 2 battle it out. We're not saying he's going to be the second coming of Ray Lewis, but let's just give him a shot to work out. Or alternatively, there is the linebacker they signed today, Kyle Wilson, and again, we'll have an interview with the Arkansas State star in a few days' time. That will be on phillysportsnetwork.com. I don't think it will be a podcast interview, but nonetheless, it will be one worth keeping an eye on. But what would you do if you're Howie Roseman right now? Are you that confident in the linebacker corps you've got? Do you attack the trade market for a guy maybe in his last year of contract? Look at what they did with Timmy Jernigan last year. I mean, that move came, a few weeks before the regular season? And now Jernigan, well, I know he's obviously going to probably miss all of this year with this injury, but the premise was there. They got a Pro Bowl-esque year out of him and then got him the contract extension. It would not surprise me to see them trade with Baltimore or a team like, I think Chicago have got a healthy amount of linebacker depth to bring in someone just to pave over the gap Because the worry is at the moment, not that there's no depth, it's that if Jordan Hicks goes down, what do you do? It is literally special teamers at the moment, unless there is a designated starter there. The other alternative would be to just bring Malcolm Jenkins down, bring Nate Jerry down, and then have all the emphasis on DBs. But if you do that, there is no Corey Graham, there is no Jalen Watkins, and it's Rodney McLeod and who? Trey Sullivan, potentially Avonte Maddox, maybe Rasul Douglas, maybe Jeremy Reeves. I think there's a lot of questions to answer, and linebacker holds the keys to most of them. So let me know what you think. If you would go out and sign a linebacker, if there's one you've got your eye on, let me know in the comments. If you're on YouTube, there's a comment section. If you're not and you're on your phone right now screaming in your car radio, give me a tweet at LiamJenkins21. Let me know what you think. But we are now going to move on to the second topic of 3 when it comes to Eagles OTA so far, and that is the cornerback competition, because this has been one of my favourite things to watch. For those of you who followed my work for a while, you'll know that through the cornerback consensus and all of the work I've done in previous years, I may or may not have developed a very slight crush on the cornerback position. So when you see the Eagles cornerback room, and you see Ronald Darby, you see Sidney Jones, Jalen Mills, Avonte Maddox, Rasul Douglas, it's hard not to get a little bit flustered, which is a great problem to have until you work out how you're going to get them all on the field. And one of the big problems this year has been, well, who replaces Patrick Robinson? Robinson, who, for me, was one of my favourite success stories of the entire Super Bowl season, because I remember about a week after he re-signed, I did an Eagles film room piece. You can view it again at phillysportsnetwork.com. I viewed his Colts tape and I was like, you know what? The down season he had was not his fault. He's a schematically inside corner. His skill set, his back pedal is much more suited to playing close to the ball on the inside. He was misused at Indianapolis, and I think if we just reboot what we saw from the year prior to that, we're going to see a very different cornerback. Training camp didn't go his way, of course. He was beaten out constantly. He was struggling against the younger wide receivers and the dominant Alshon Jeffrey. Then the team traded for Ronald Darby, and it forces him inside. The rest is history, because he's in his position where he plays best. If any teams are looking for an NFL scout... Sorry, just got a little bit, frog in my throat. But back onto this cornerback picture, who does replace Patrick Robinson, who is now reunited with the Nola in New Orleans? It's a good question. A few people are looking at Avonte Maddox, 4th round pick. Very feisty, quite small, very aggressive, plays with a lot of heart. It's a great option, but I do think that being a rookie is going to be quite limited. Now, my personal viewpoint on this was move Jalen Mills inside because he's had experience already. Have Darby and Mills on the outside. Mwah. Le fini. But no. We get to OTAs and the Eagles are doing Eagles things once again, because what do we see, ladies and gentlemen, on the first day of Phase 3? Sidney Jones not only just taking nickel snaps, not only working out of the slot, but doing pretty well. He's going stride for stride for Nelson Aguilar. He's intercepting passes. He's breaking them up. And you know what? All of a sudden, it makes sense. What DB does not want the versatility in his arsenal to play inside or outside? And Jones, someone that has had a year learning under Corey Undlin, learning mental reps, mental snaps, to get out on the field in Week 17, he showed a lot of potential. But if he can play in the slot, the Eagles have already got 2 very sound starting outside corners. If he can play in the nickel and do it very well, which I know it's very early days without pads on, but it's hard not to get just a little bit excited, right? Jones, Darby, Mills all out there. Douglas can be a backup cornerback too. Jones can shift outside if needed, but that would be a dream come true. I mean, Jones is a very rapid cornerback. I think he's got the speed to play outside. He's got the size to do it, and he's an absolute ball hawk. And I don't want to tempt fate. I really, really, really don't want to. But I did not give this move a lot of thought. And when you look at Sidney Jones now and you go back at that Week 17 tape, you go back to the Washington tape, you can see a lot of Patrick Robinson. And I did not look at that at first. You look at the comparisons coming out and, the way he plays on the outside and how aggressive he is and how composed at the same time. It's like his head is on a swivel and his body is just following so effortlessly. Patrick Robinson would not be a corner I look at. But now, after a year in that system, seeing how Robinson moves and dictates the field, how he directs traffic on way back, you can see shades of it in there. And I think that's just from a year of mental reps. I think that there is going to be a big nickel corner competition because it's one of the lone starting spots that haven't really been decided as of right now. But what do you do? I mean, it's going to be an exciting time. Maddox is going to want playing time. I think Douglas, as I said in last week's show, would be better off trying to transition to safety and follow in the footsteps of Jalen Watkins. But this is going to be a very fun, very exciting nickel cornerback battle. And there is a complete wildcard that nobody had predicted previously in Sidney Jones. And that is going to be a lot of fun to watch. When you get to training camp and the pads go on, is Maddox going to give it a little bit more on special teams? Is Jones going to be on special teams? Will he be on the outside? Someone like Devontae Bowsby or Busby. I mean, see, I'm British, I can't do this stuff. Devontae, I'm going to say Bowsby, out of Pittsburgh State. It's his second year in the league. He was undrafted last year, spent time with the Eagles practice squad. He turned heads. He's had time with the Chiefs as well. But he's also spent time in the practice squad, as I said. And on day one of OTAs, was quite the menace. And at 6'2", 190 pounds, he's built like that prototypical corner. And I think the Eagles are going to have a lot more candidacy than you may think when it comes to that nickel spot. So the whole cornerback shuffle, you could have a million combinations. The only one I think you can kind of rule out is that Ronald Darby won't be starting inside. I think anything else, whether that's Mills, whether it's Jones, Douglas, Bowsby, Reeves, Maddox, whoever, I think there's a lot of potential there. I think we're going to see a lot of mixing around. One day we may see Jones on the inside, the next day, well, it may even be Mike Wallace, you never know. But I think there's going to be a lot of changing. Don't expect Jones to come out day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and be working out of the nickel every single time. Now, the other thing I want to get to, I'll do so in just a moment, was there's one player that I know what's going to happen again, and it serves as a big memory jog to many. Now, in 2014 and beyond, there has been a legacy known as Nelson Aguilar-itis, where after a troubled rookie year, after a bad year 2, people had started to give up on Nelson Aguilar. So he comes into the league in year 2015, first round pick, and he struggles. And everyone was so quick to write him off. Every writer, every fan, every analyst, every player didn't want to know. And when you look at the tape, it was hard to see why, actually. It was really difficult. And I remember one of the only people to have not given up was Teron Davenport. I remember I did the article in 2015 after week 4 against the Jets, I believe it was. And Aguilar was lined up against Darrelle Revis. And he was burning him time after time after time on in routes and posts and slants. Revis had no answer. But because Bradford had missed so much of training camp and Aguilar was out with his own thing, they could only get so much chemistry. So all the traffic went over the middle. And then in year 2 with Carson Wentz, Aguilar, again, new quarterback, different chemistry. Wentz really bonds with Jordan Matthews, really bonds with Zach Ertz. Traffic goes over the middle. Aguilar struggles mentally. Aguilar gets involved in a strip club altercation where luckily it was all swept under the rug, but probably should have stayed out of. Then he has to battle confidence. And then year 3, he comes back and explodes. And everyone's like, what? Who is this guy? It's a completely different player. He's the same damn player he's always been. He's that same crisp route runner. He's now just got that pizzazz back. He's playing with flair. He's playing with confidence. And that is what happens in the NFL. People are so quick to turn on players. It's why quarterbacks go number 1 overall every single year, because you're expecting to find the next Peyton Manning, and if it doesn't pan out in year 1 or year 2, Cleveland Browns, you end up trading away your team, you end up getting a load of picks, and you rinse and repeat until you find the guy. There's another player on the Eagles set to follow that pattern, and that man is Donnell Pumphrey. And out of nowhere, everyone's just trying to jump on it now because it's a bit too soon, and they don't want to miss the boat again. Now, the SDSU product has had a phenomenal college campaign. During his time with the Eagles, he just looked to struggle. In training camp, he looked a bit small. In preseason, he looked like he was being manhandled at times, and he couldn't burst. He just couldn't accelerate. He was a very monotone back. They got him in the receiving game, lined him up as a slot receiver. It was great, but when he was hitting the hole, he couldn't find that next level. And now, on the first day of OTAs, he's flying around like a wasp. And all of a sudden, it's, whoa, that Donnell Pumphrey's bulked up a little bit. Donnell Pumphrey looks very good. And I guarantee you now, if we see a breakout, it'll be the same thing again and again. I think Pumphrey's got a lot of potential there. Bringing Sproles back is only going to enhance that competition, and I personally believe that those two will be duking it out. Sproles wants to win another ring. I mean, how many backs the Eagles keep on their roster, I don't know. At the minute, we can look in Ajayi and Clement as the two mainstays. After that, it would not surprise me to see someone like Matt Jones, then Sproles, and then Pumphrey. The last two splitting that niche role, adding in the pistol formations, and of course, a bit of special teams wizardry never hurt anybody. Alternatively, Pumphrey goes in the practice squad and they keep Smallwood, but one of those combinations. But don't be so quick to give up on players, alright? Pumphrey did not really have a platform to show what he could do because training camp was just a complete flat-out flunk. Alright, he's a young guy, he's got a lot of potential there. If we gave up on Nelson Aguilar last year, and we get Jordan Matthews in the slot, as much as I love Jordan Matthews, as much as he is the nicest, most genuine person I've ever had the privilege of speaking to in this business, would they have received that same level of production? I don't know. You tell me. But don't be so quick to write off Donnell Pumphrey just yet, because what he brings to the table is versatility, its explosiveness, and its unpredictability. And those are the three traits that Jim Schwartz covets in his running backs. Not Jim Schwartz, Doug Peterson. I don't think Jim Schwartz covets anything in his running backs. But there is, on that note, actually, very unrelated note, I think it was an interview or like a coaches meeting where Jim Schwartz is talking about how to stop versatile running backs and how to stop screen passes and outside runners. And it's really, really interesting. So if you can find it, I'm sure if you just search Jim Schwartz running back somewhere on the internet, it will come up. I'll try and find it and drop a link in the description, but it is really interesting, so please do go and find that. But on to our final topic, and it's one that I'm sure not many people want to talk about, and that's Carson Wentz. I think on the first day of OTAs, he came out swinging and pretty much won everyone's hearts. A superhero to many, Carson Wentz, 4 months, I would say, after tearing his ACL in Week 14 against the LA Rams now, not St. Louis, of course, was out there in OTAs like nothing had happened. Going through drills on footwork and quickness and lateral movement and throwing balls. And everyone was like, the man is literally made of steel. Like, nothing you do will keep him down. And there are two ways of looking at this. One, you've got to see it through the eyes of the quarterback, okay? And that is that was his year. That was the year of Carson Wentz. And it was ripped from him so cruelly, so heartbreakingly. And he's then got to go and watch his backup, Nick Foles, win a Super Bowl while he's sat on the sidelines, watching a team rally round him. And for Wentz to be that humble, that team first, that team-centric guy to want to help Nick Foles win, sit with him in film rooms and still be grinding out and looking at plays and being in the meetings and the practices, says a lot about who he is. But make no mistake, that competitive hunger that fuels anybody inside an NFL locker room will be just as great, if not even greater. That's a severe chip on the shoulder. And he'll be coming out swinging, and he'll be itching, he'll be scratching to get back out on that field and do what he does best. At the same time, if your name is Doug Peterson, I'm a bit worried. Because to me, this looks like you've got, and I don't know how to word this other than, there's always those kids in class who are excellent at what they do, and because of that, they mess around a little bit, and they start, throwing bits of paper across the room, and the teacher lets it go because that kid's excellent. Because it's part of who he is. If he doesn't do that, he's going to get stroppy and he won't perform. And then you've got the other kids who have to be very hard coached. You have to be groomed up and really nurtured. Someone that needs that aggressive type, hands-in-your-face style mentality. Now with Wentz, the discussion has always been that he's too aggressive. Alright, that he doesn't slide, that he dives down, and he exposes himself to potential injury and to contact and to threats that no quarterback should. You look at how Aaron Rodgers protects the ball, how Russell Wilson protects himself, and Wentz doesn't do that. Wentz is a human superhero, and no one is saying that he can't still be that wizard or that magician or that incredible quarterback or that sensational athlete, but there's got to be a time where he just takes a knee, where he just slides, where he just simply throws the ball away. And it's those smarter decisions which are ultimately going to shape out throughout his career. He's very young, it's his 3rd year, there's going to be a long, long way to go until we see him get to that elite level. However, no matter how many times it came up, no matter how many near misses there were, whenever Doug Peterson was asked on it, it was, yeah, we're working with him, we're talking, he knows, we know, he knows. He knows he's going to get better, we know. And Carson Wentz would be, well, yeah, but I'm not changing for anyone, that's my playing style, that's who I am. And that's amazing to fans, don't get me wrong, you're like, wow, look at that authority, like, he hasn't got any authority, he's just going to go and do what he wants because that's what makes him and the team better. Fine. But as a head coach, your quarterback who's coming off a torn ACL is now, and I don't want to say this because without extensive knowledge of the situation, without knowing that rehab process or how close he is to returning, it's dangerous. Now I know you look at Sam Bradford, he was back at OTAs and training camp and no one batted an eyelid, but this was sustained a lot later in the season. He's still with the knee brace on, of course. And the slightest misstep, the slightest mistake where that ankle twitches, where you can't get your foot planted correctly, or it could be a stray ball, it could be a play action pass where someone stamps on your foot, you're a lot more susceptible to injury if you've already got an injury, or re-injuring that injury. All it takes is the tiniest mistake and you're back to square one. Now, Doug Peterson's assured the media that, well, it's 100% part of his rehab and everything's okay. But to me, this is another instance where Wentz is getting what Wentz wants. And that's completely fine. It could be absolutely nothing at all. It's the off-season. I'm sure it's one of those storylines which are going to come and go. But we've seen it too much. That play style's not changing. He is still that ruthless athlete. And for better or worse, that's who he is. And if coaches can't iron that out of him, there's going to be a little bit of friction. Because Wentz doesn't want to change. Wentz wants to be that superhero. Wentz wants to be diving for touchdowns. And the fans want him to. His teammates want him to. But there's got to be a limit. And the best kind of ability is availability. And I genuinely would be a little bit concerned to see Wentz so active in OTAs so soon. Is this premature? It may be completely fine. He could have that knee brace off tomorrow and he could be running round more than I could ever run in my life. And having, you know, the best rehab possible and it could never be an issue again. But what if it does? What if there was an opportunity for Peterson to say, you know what, take OTAs off, go back to North Dakota, work out privately with a quarterback guru who you did last year, maybe just take some time off or stay at the NovaCare and be in the film room. And he didn't take that. And Wentz, just like Paul Warrilow, ACL, Nick Foles is your starting quarterback. Now, that's not a problem. Nick Foles obviously is a fantastic quarterback. But then you head into year 4 of Carson Wentz's deal, year 4 or 5, and that is a severe problem in his playing style. And now this is very far-fetched, I know. But football is a very strange sport. It is a very, very punishing sport. You look at someone like Sam Bradford, who's had 2 torn ACLs, and he's not even a mobile passer. I could run faster than Sam Bradford. This game will beat you up again and again and again. And if there is even a subtle hesitation, even the tiniest hesitation in a doctor or coach's minds, knowing that he has not been cleared to practice, and he is on that field with 89 other men with balls flying around and competition building, you take him out and you limit him. And I think this is going to be Peterson's toughest task because nothing so far has indicated that Wentz is going to change that style. And I don't know what it's going to take for that to happen. And is this premature? Let me know. I could be off my rocker. I may not have a clue what I'm on about. Let me know if you think it's just a slight bit of paranoia. Or if you too are a bit concerned that this early into the proceedings, Wentz is already throwing the ball and moving around and doing footwork drills. Could be completely fine. Could be nothing. Could be disastrous. There's two ways of looking at it. I'd love to know what your views are. But thank you so much for tuning in, guys. It has been an honour giving you this podcast. Make sure you hit that rate 5 stars button on iTunes. There is a link in the description below. Get this podcast sent to your device every single week for free by hitting that button. And don't forget to stick around to phillysportsnetwork.com for all the latest Eagles content over the coming months. My name has been Liam Jenkins. You can follow me at LiamJenkins21, and I'll see you very soon.